Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. This is episode 370 and I'm so excited to join by my future self. This is what I want to be like. I want to be like Miss Phyllis Dobbs. And Phyllis is here. I met her at camp and she just blew me away. This lady has done so many things. And I really feel like she's a trailblazer. She was a trailblazer for women entrepreneurs in the 80s as an artist selling her designs, and she's sold wholesale. She has a heart for community. She created a conference for people that were licensing their artwork and selling it since you've been doing that for like 14 or 15 years, right?
Actually, for that, it's been since 13. So this will be the 9th one coming up.
Okay. So maybe not as long as I made it out to be, but it seems like a long time. I know. And you did it digital. That it's been small and then it got big and then it got digital last year or virtual last year. So so Amora says she remembers you from camp, and Pridge is here also from Vancouver, Washington. So I'm glad, and she loves to do things with her hands too. So we are excited. I'm really excited to have you, Phyllis. So can you give everybody a little bit of your background? I know, so you grew up in Mobile where I live now, but we've never met. I can't wait for you to be able to come home and we can go to lunch or dinner or something. But then you came to camp and you're in Birmingham, but you went to University of Alabama and you studied interior design, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Give them a little bit of like your career background, the shortened version, because we're going to dive into it in a minute.
I went to college, and then when I graduated, I took a 9-to-5 job. But growing up, my aunt and grandmother, my grandmother did quilting. My aunt did needlework, all kinds of needlework. My mother knitted, so I learned a lot about needlework, and I've always liked doing things creative with my hands. So it just started with that, knowing that in the background, and at some point wanting to do that myself. So I actually called a needlework company and said, "How do I design for you?" And they go, "Well, we sell kits. You've got to sell us the kits." And I knew nothing about how to create a kit. So I eventually learned that, sold to the company, and about 3 months ago, I get a call from the person that the company wanted to know if I wanted the job being their buyer. But it was like way up north, I would have had to move. So, but I mean, it was kind of like that's come full circle, for me. Like, I'd like to design for this company, to them offering me the job.
That's a big time frame too, though. So you've been, you sold to them like when? What time period?
80s. Yeah, 80s. Because that's when I started my business doing needlework design, and so that was when I called, and I thought, I don't know how to do this. So then I found another way to go about it. Ended up selling kits to them, and then they offered me all these years later.
Three months ago. So that is a great testament to a great career, that you have done other things, you've learned other things, but they really value your eye and they understand where you are in the industry, that you're still relevant, and they would have wanted you to be a buyer, which I think is incredible. And it's about relationships that you've had with these companies that you didn't fade out or fizzle out. You still, I think that's a really huge, impressive, just to be asked.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to get into that into my presentation, but this all comes around, and the contacts I made back in the 80s and 90s are still with me now, and it's all a big circle. And it's amazing how things, they change, like bell bottoms. Who ever thought bell bottoms from the 70s would come back in style back in sometime a few years ago? Everything comes back.
Right. All right. So we have some new people. Nick, if you're here, just plop in the chat if you want to talk to us. If you have questions. Regime is here. She's in Columbus, Georgia. I think that's my friend Tim, maybe from Ohio, but I don't know, because just Tim doesn't. I can't tell. Just it's like Madonna or Cher. Tim might not be might be somebody else. So tell us where you're popping in from. So you've started your business back in. So when did you? Well, what year did you start creating the kits for the needlework?
Well, I actually started the needlework before I started kitting. I did my own publications, cross stitch publications, and I did that. And once I learned that and learned the industry, then I learned how to kit. So that was in the mid 80s, say 85, 86, 85 was basically when I first started.
But that's not all you've done. And you've continually learned, and you had a kid like this, that you were married, you raised a son. So it wasn't like you were just had nothing to do. You were, right?
Right. In the first 10 years of my business, I was also working full time that regular job, and finally got out of that and doing this full time. So I had a lot of all-nighters with my business.
Yeah. Well, so how old was your son when you were pulling these all-nighters? Was he young enough, or was he in school, or what?
He was young enough. I would say probably 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in that range.
So so I asked that because it's okay. Naomi's here, and she has 2 little ones. And so I always think, I want to make sure that people understand that things are possible. And granted, an 8-year-old is a lot more self-sufficient than maybe a 3-year-old would be, for sure. But I think that there's things that you can learn. And that's what you did. You learned a ton, but you also were a trailblazer. You went to China, and you would go for like a month at a time. This may be in your slide thing too, but to me, that's impressive of somebody that wasn't really the case back in the 80s and 90s. Maybe there weren't a lot of women that were going and doing that and handling that part of the business. So to me, again, I want to be like you, Phyllis, because I just think you're a trailblazer, and you just think nothing of it. You're like, oh yeah, I learned that. I did that on Procreate. And I just think I'm just like, nothing stops you. And that's why I want to be you. Okay. So
pretty great.
So, and we called this episode, How Many Times Can I Reinvent Myself? Because you saw that the trend in the 80s, I remember cross stitch, right? And we did that, me and my sister and my mom. But then the trend changed. So you saw it was changing. And instead of just like, oh my goodness, all my eggs are in this one basket, you pivoted. So how many times do you think you've pivoted in your career?
Well, I've probably pivoted 7 or 8 times. It's within the creative aspect, but there's so many different ways that you can be creative, like from cross stitch design to quilting to all assorted type of things, and then to art licensing, and then doing the conference. So, but the thing is nothing is a straight line. One thing leads to another, and then you circle back and you go back again. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we were talking about all the different contacts. They'll contact you and you go back and forth. And so nothing is just a straight line. You have things running parallel too. So it's just
how have you always been able to juggle? Because it seems like, was it ever hard to handle so many things at once?
Yes, it's hard, and it takes a lot of focus and sometimes a lot of late hours, but it takes, like this week, I've had so many little things on my mind, and I just started making a list with my notes on my computer and just writing everything down in each day what I had to do, and the list of everything I needed to do. And then below I put what I've accomplished for that day. So that's had to keep me on track lately, because there's just so many little things that have been going on, and along with the big things, client deadlines, and so much of that. So you got to do the deadlines first and work all the others in.
I think that that's a really good way to look at it. Also, is that you have a list, but then you also make a list of the things that you were accomplished. So you're being grateful, and you are understanding that kind of the importance of not just being down on yourself, that you're like, hey, I actually got things done, right?
That's very important to know that you have accomplished some things, even if it's minor things, that you did get something done. Because when you look back, you go, what did I do yesterday? And you can't think of anything. You felt like the day was wasted, but it's not. So
yeah. And I think it's important, especially at this time when things aren't a straight line. You didn't realize there would be so many twists and turns. So it's really important, because now you're logging it in as, hey, I learned a new route to get to this thing that I didn't think was going to be such a windy road. When you're doing the kits, and so do you think of yourself as an illustrator? Because I totally think of you as an illustrator, because I've seen your illustrations. But would you have called yourself an illustrator back in the 80s?
No, I would consider myself a designer, even though I created the art to use for the designs I created for needlework. I consider myself just like a needlework designer, but now I think of myself as an illustrator, and I know it all goes in together. So,
It,
so
it does. Have you always been tech savvy? Have you always been on that cutting edge?
no, because when I started, there were no computers.
Yeah, but did you embrace it? Were you like one of those people always that was like, oh, cool, we'll figure this out?
Yes, I couldn't wait to get my first computer, and I learned how to do that. It was like DOS because there were no windows, there were nothing. It was like that drove me crazy. And I'd go to print something, and it would literally take all night to print one page. I mean, so then you learn as things, more technology comes in, you just learn it each step of the way, and then you're learning like programs such as Photoshop and Illustrator, and then Procreate, and then all of this stuff that we need to know now, all of the different apps, and I mean, it's never ending with the learning. And they never make it simple. They always, as soon as you learn something, they upgrade it some way.
But that's what I love about you is that you embrace this. And it's just, I think of you as this like curious childlike spirit, because you really do dive in and you know more about Procreate than I do. And you're like, oh yeah, I got those brushes. I did this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I do not know how. I don't know when you sleep, but we're going to get into it. So have you stayed within that kind of crafts industry, or have you pivoted outside? So cross stitch is within that kind of, it be sold at Hobby Lobby or Michael's or fabric stores or things like that. What other, or have you stayed within? Because I know you've created fabrics too.
Well, there's really within the, say, the creative industry, you've got the crafts, which includes needlework or anything that you do with your hands. And then you got the quilting industry, which is that is a huge market. I mean, like multi-billion-dollar market with the fabrics and everything that goes with it. And that's kind of like a whole different industry until itself. And then you've got the licensing, which is art licensing, and that goes into the giftware, the home industries, garden. So that's a whole new different direction too with that industry. So it is really kind of three distinct industries there.
So then did you have to learn new things or new connections within that? So it was really, so would you go to different shows? Like, I think we've talked about like Surtech or going to getting things licensed, and that's a different kind of like a stationary outlet, right?
Right.
Or paper things. And then there's other shows that you kind of had to figure out and navigate through for those other industries?
Yes, because when I was doing, the needlework and then the craft industry, I learned all the companies, I learned the personnel, I learned the designers, became friends with those. And then when I switched to fabrics, it's a whole new set of companies, buyers, designers. So you learn these, and then with licensing, it's the same thing. You learn all these companies, the markets. You like the Atlanta gift market is the biggest market to attend for licensing, and then with the quilts, you have the biggest one is the quilt market in Houston, and then you got the craft and hobbies with different shows and needlework. So, but I find that some of these people cross over. Like you go people I knew with the crafts, and then you see them at the quilt markets, and then you run into them at the Atlanta in the gift market there, but basically they're separate industries, separate companies, separate buyers, product developers, whatever. So you do have a whole new set of people and companies you learn with each one.
That's cool. Okay, so do you want to jump into your presentation for us, into what you're going to teach us?
I entitled this, There's Always Something Next, because that's what it is, and nothing stays the same. And you can see from my beginning with the cross stitch to where I am now with product licensing, and this is some home designs. It's not a straight line. It's really curvy, circling back. There's parallel lines and everything to get from one end to the other. So I started with the cross stitch, and I didn't know how to do it, as I've mentioned. So I went to market and met some designers there, and they told me all the ins and outs. So when I started designing, I did 4-color product like this. And I found out later that most people started with black and white, one page, but I jumped in with both feet and did these, and that really started me in the business. So my business just really took off So while cross stitch was so popular, I mean, there was like a cross stitch shop just about on every corner. I designed these and had these published and printed here in Birmingham. And I did a total of 50 of these throughout my cross stitch career before the market crash. Here's another one.
So market crashed when?
Around 1990 or so. So I was in it for about 5 years and really doing great when it crashed. Cross stitch shops went out of business. The distributors who bought tons and tons of books went out of business. So there was nothing to sell anybody. I mean, no customers anymore. So
how much of your time at this point, how much of your time were you doing, like in a week? How much of your hours during the week were you spending working on this business?
I would work at my job and then come home and work till late at night, designing these. And then because the computers weren't out yet, I did a lot of it at first by hand on a typewriter, graphs. And then once I got the computer, I did it on that. And then now it's like they got all these programs to do it with. So it's so different. But I spent a lot of hours doing this. And there were days when I'd take off from work and I'd stay in my pajamas all day because I'd be sitting and doing all of this. But I wanted to show about this one, those sacks on that. Was my first foray into manufacturing, because one of the needlework companies wanted me to manufacture this for them. So I designed that, and then they wanted it manufactured. So I found people within the state to actually make them for me, and went with bagging them up, labeling them and everything, and then ship them off to the company for them to sell.
That's cool.
I'm gonna say I really didn't like manufacturing at all. Okay, and while I was doing the cross stitch, and this is when kind of cross stitch started going away, and I started doing freelance, and I did a lot of freelance design. And ribbon embroidery came out as pretty big for a while, and it didn't stay around very long, about 5 minutes, I think, because this was a high-end company that I did these books for, and I did several more with them, but a company that was producing cheap ribbons kind of flooded the market, and that kind of people started losing interest because of the ribbons were not good quality or anything that they could get a hold of. So like I said, I did books for these with part of my freelance work after that. So I did have to reinvent myself at the same time. This is a parallel course. While I was doing all of this, I was doing quilt designing too and doing the patterns. Okay, this was freelance work. I did a lot of kit designs, and for this company, I did about, I think, 12 of this kits called denim embroidery. I presented the concept to them, and I did the designs. They were on jeans and jean jackets. And so they did the kits and sold them into the craft stores like Michael's and so on.
Yeah. So the company would call you and say, we need something for like teenage girls, and then, or maybe not alcohol on teenage girls, who knows? But like they would give you the demographic, and then they would tell you kind of, or would they give you, what kind of parameters would they give you?
Some companies, like one of the companies I did like some designs for, they would tell me what product they needed the designs for, and I would just present designs, and they would then get back with me with the ones they wanted. But for that embroidery, I presented that concept to them, and already had the designs kind of sketched out, and presented that to them. I even had the name. I came up with the name and everything, so they liked it. So they licensed that into the kits.
Oh, cool. So the next one where you were, I guess, these look so fancy, like French knots and whatnot. I mean, and Katya was like, "Oh, these are beautiful." So, like, do you know how to make all these things too?
Yes. I designed these and stitched these. They were a variety of embroidery. The bottom one's cross stitch, but it's using the different floss and threads from the DMC company. It's one of the major company for like needlework floss and fibers. And these were used for ads. I did these for them to use in ads. So they presented, those were in magazines for the advertisement for the different threads that were in these.
So did you take the photos, or did you actually send them the artwork?
I sent them I stitched the designs and sent it to them, and they did the photos of it.
Oh, wow.
Like I said,
cool.
Freelance covered a variety of work. So, and this one here, this was one of my most fun and unusual projects I did freelance. This is for the same company, but you can see this is like a Monopoly board.
Yeah.
And so I designed all of the squares going around. I also came up with Monopoly's got like Park Place and these expensive ones, and then the low end rent. So I told them which ones should be the high ends or the low end ones. I designed the backs of the cards. I didn't do the girl. They've got a cartoonist to do that, but I designed the words and what you go on the back of those cards you pick up in the center, and pretty much the whole thing.
I like the go to jail is rip out seam. That is hilarious. That's so clever because you have to start over, right? Like you lose everything. It's super clever.
And so the funny thing about it, this was years ago that I did this, and I still get emails from people trying to find that. I got an email like a couple of months ago, somebody wanting to know where she could find it. And, a few months before that, I had from somebody else. So people are still looking for this, even though it's no longer in print.
So they had the idea to do this, and then you figured out how to make it? Like you pitched it, or they came to you and then you just figured it out?
They came to me and said they wanted me to design the boards going around, like the different, I think I gave them all the names too, like there's Star Lane or different ones because that was the star pattern. So I gave them all of the names and created the actual blocks. And like I said, I did just pretty much everything except the girl that's on the cards. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was really a really fun project to do. I really enjoyed it. So okay, another freelance thing I did, and this is, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but when I was in the doing quilt designs with my fabric company, I did some designs for other people too, because I knew how to design quilts. So I did the quilts for some of their other artists. And so I did this one for Marie Osmond.
That's who I thought that was. I used to watch her show.
She had a fabric line with the same company I was with. And so I designed that quilt with her fabrics and then got to meet her, as you can see, and got a hug from her because she loved the quilt. You can see it on the wall behind her.
Yeah, that's cool.
And this right here is kind of like the sum of all my freelance work for magazines and books.
Wow.
One of those has got at least one design I created for it in it, and several of them have like anywhere from 2 to 6 designs in them.
Wow, Miss Phyllis, that's impressive.
That's a lot of work.
It is. Wow.
So then when I was doing the quilts, I did quilt patterns to start with, and I exhibited in Houston at the other places for the big quilt markets with the patterns. But then I also did books too. And the one on the right, the Dimensional Quilts, was my first book, and the one on the left is my last book. So the one Dimensional Quilts, I don't know, it's like, I've worked in the industry for so long, knew so many people, had done so much. But when you walk up to somebody you don't know and you have a book, it kind of gives you street creds. You can walk up and introduce yourself, but, they kind of like blow you off or something. But if you got a book, it's like, oh, yes, fantastic. And they want to work with you.
So I want to just clarify. So these are are you doing the designs of the fabric also?
Well, for these, I didn't. These are just some books I did that were not my fabrics, though. But
then, do you tell people which you need a small I can't remember.
I tell them in the book, like say the orange fabric or a tonal, that the oranges, I'd say orange tonal fabric or stripe fabric, or I would describe the fabric, and you got diagrams in there that showed. I did do a book that had a lot of my fabrics in it, but these two didn't.
At this point, were you also designing fabric, or not yet?
Not yet. Well, okay. No, I had not yet. I think I had it with the one on the left, the astrometrical quilts. I had with that one, but the one on the right I hadn't. But the one on the right kind of led me into designing fabrics, because Hancock Fabrics was carrying that book, and they were starting a program where they were having like some designer fabrics. And so they had me and 2 others doing their designer fabrics, but it came because of that book, because I had met with them and I told them I wanted to design fabrics. And so they're out of Tupelo. So it's not too far. So I went to Tupelo and I carried my art, and she said, yes, we want to do the fabrics. And then she, told me which collection she wanted and said, now go back and create the fabrics. Well, it's kind of like backwards, because back then everything was started being done on Photoshop, and you would send Photoshop files, but they wanted the actual art of the fabric instead of the Photoshop files. And so what I did is I created the fabric on my Photoshop, printed it out, sketched it, and then pan painted it.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
Yeah, I carried it to them. And she said, well, you'll get the originals back in pristine shape. But of course, they came back with pencil marks, staple holes, tape, and everything else on them. So that was not to be. But after that, I designed that fabric is when I went to China working, because I went to China and I tried to find some photos to show you some of the things over there, but I couldn't find any. But
like, what year was that when you started going to China?
That was 2003, and I went from 2003 to 2005.
Okay.
So while I would go for 5 times a year for about 3 to 5 weeks at a time. And over there, they brought me over to design fabrics, but due to the quotas, they could not actually export fabrics. So I ended up doing some of those, those wide ribbons you see at Christmas. That's what they were doing, a lot of that. So I did some of that. I did textile products like kitchen. I mean, it was mostly like Christmas tree skirts, Christmas stockings, other holidays. I would do gift bags for the holidays, placemats, table runners, throw pillows. I just did that's what I was doing over there, designing all of that. So
wow.
So then after that ended at 2 years, I really had to stay put after that. My husband became disabled, so I couldn't just go off and leave him for weeks at a time. So I kind of came back. And so then I came back and decided what I really wanted to do was fabric design.
So I know that we have some, I know my friend Maura, she's here, she's in Raleigh. So she's probably on fire, definitely wants to know. She's been doing some fabric designs too. So if you just lay it on us, because I think we're absolutely wanting to know how you got into this and how at this point, were you thinking you're an illustrator?
I was thinking then as a fabric designer. I mean, I will niche myself in instead of just saying illustrator or designer. So I call my company Art and Design because, some of it, I still got that designer mindset instead of thinking illustrator, which is what I actually do. But I've just been designing so long in my mind that that's what I call myself. But with the fabrics, I had to learn how to do repeats lately. But when I was first started, I didn't have to do the actual repeat. I would put it in like faux repeat, kind of like how I wanted it to look. And then the company would put it in the very strict repeat. When I started with Hancock, that's when like I said, I had to draw that by hand, and then they put it in the actual pattern. When I first went to the show where they were showing that fabric, I said, well, where's the fabric? Because I walked in and I thought it was my artwork. That's how close they came to the color. She said, that's the fabric. And I literally had to touch it because it looked just like my art, so close. So then when I started going with this company, I would design for them for 9 years, and I would send them the art in layers in Photoshop. And they would, of course, do the strict repeat. But then I've since learned to put it in formal repeats. I can do that myself. And it is so easy now. I don't know why I didn't learn before. As you can see here, too, that my natural artwork is bright, colorful, and whimsy. Mm-hmm. So they also have learned fabric companies, they create quilts to go with the fabric lines to help promote the fabrics. So it helped that I could do quilt designing because I could do my own quilts like I wanted with the fabrics, whereas other people, they would, have to get somebody else to do the quilts. And I also did here, like I say, some quilts for other artists like that one from Marie.
When they would hire you, I'm sorry to keep interrupting. When they would hire you, so you worked for them for 9 years, was it just on like a contract by contract basis, or would they hire you and you would do for a whole year, you would do 20 designs or 3 designs or?
Was like each contract was like a 3-year contract, and it would be renewed. And I would do like collections like twice a year. And sometimes I would submit to them and say, what about this? And other times, I would just send, every time I get new artwork, I'd send it to them. And sometimes they'd write back, I want this in fabrics or something. But this one right here, this one was called Be Yourself. They suggested that. They said, do one for bees. And I was actually on a plane going to Hawaii for vacation and was drawing some of these on the plane because I needed to get them done by a certain time. So I was sitting on that plane because it was an 8-hour flight, and I had my Wacom tablet and a laptop, and I was sitting there in my seat drawing these.
That's awesome.
So as an illustrator or a freelancer or somebody that's doing stuff like that, you never know what your time frame is going to be. I mean, you'll be up all night, or things come up and you got a deadline, or you got this and that. Like I say, this came up and I had to do it while I was on vacation or flying across the country.
Yeah. I've definitely had to work on vacation too. So I'm with you.
So with quilt designs, some people may, and I've had this question asked us not too long ago about designing for clothing. Now with clothing, they want to buy the designs outright. They do not license clothing fabrics. And a lot of them they get from going to shows like Magic and some of the others where the Certex, maybe where they just buy it outright. So if you want to license your art, you do it in what's called the quilting industry, but it's used for everything. These fabrics aren't just for quilts, even though quilting is, like I say, a multi-billion-dollar business. I mean, up in the 50-something billion-dollar industry. So they do have a lot of sales, but they also, people buy them for clothes, kids' clothing, home decor, things like that. So, you're not limited to just quilts with these fabrics when you say the quilting market. Anyway, there's a format, the way they like the designs done. If somebody's wanting to do fabrics, there's a strict formula of how the fabrics, like for instance, a panel, or, you got what you call blenders, where you have, like you see these bee prints here at the bottom, the pink and the orange. That's what's called a blender, because it blends in with the rest of the fabrics to kind of tie them together. And you can see like the yellow border in the quilt, in the blue background behind the bee blocks, so you've got different, you have to have a stripe, a main design. So you've got several categories that your fabrics have got to fit in for the market for fabrics.
And Pridge said, nice pattern. She said she liked your bees.
Oh, thanks. Now, this is my first licensed product after fabrics, because at the same time I was designing fabrics and quilts, I was also creating art or illustrations for licensing. So this is my first, it's a coaster set that was done where they took my art and actually made, they did the layout themselves for this one.
So how did you learn about the licensing stuff? Like, is this just from having conversations or getting burned, or like how did you learn? Because if you're and you probably are going to get to this, but you're an artist, you're a designer, you're working kind of solo on your own. So you meet up when you go to these marts or markets, but you don't necessarily, you learn when you're in community, right?
Right. That's the thing about community is, like I learned to do the cross stitch design by going to a market and talking to all these different designers. And everybody's always so willing to share in the creative industries. It may not be true if you were in like a software industry or something, but with creative industries, everybody is so willing to share. So with needlework, they gave me all the information I needed. And then when I got ready, I wanted to do art licensing, I went to Certex show and walked the Certex show and the licensing show. Both of those were in New York. Now the licensing one is in Las Vegas. But you go there and you meet other artists that are sitting there in their booths and you talk to them, and then you form, you get in these groups. Now, back then it was Yahoo groups. Now they're all Facebook groups, and you get these communities and things, and you just learn with the industry. So you just dive in with both feet and start showing your art.
Did you do a booth and then you would have somebody help you with the booth, or were you just walking?
The first couple of times I went, I walked. You just walk it and see what it's all about, what kind of art's being shown, how to do your booths, because you don't, like you go and you don't even know how to put a booth together until you've been and seen what the booths look like. And you learn that way. And like I say, people are generous in telling you things, and you learn that way too. And in the Certex is held in connection with the National Stationery Show, so you can see the stationery booths also. And so that's kind of a crossover industry, because the stationery falls within the the gift industry. So just a learning process. You just have to dive in and just start. And you can't be bashful either about your art, because I would go and I feel like nobody's going to like my art. You feel kind of like nobody's going to like my art. I'm not like good as that person, or I'm not as good as that person. But I've learned that everybody feels that way. Every artist, no matter how successful they are, has this thing like, I'm not as good as that person, or like you're a poser. Everybody feels that way. And so it's not just, somebody may feel that way, but that's the way everybody feels. So don't ever let that hold you back with what you're trying to do.
I agree. We always, and Katya said, glad to hear it, and that it's not just her.
Right. It's everybody. Because I've heard some people that would never have thought to say that, and they all feel the same way. So this is what I kind of part of what I'm doing now. I've been licensing, like some garden products, garden flags, like I say, the coasters, different products. And so I'm doing a lot of bedding, throws, and so other things I'll show you. But I just want to show you, when I showed you my fabric, my style naturally is bright and colorful and whimsy. Well, this company I'm doing a lot of work for, they are lodge, Lake and Lodge look. And so that's not whimsy and it's not really colorful. So I had to learn and adapt to do these type of designs, but I've been doing it for so long now. I actually enjoy working in this medium. And so it's really turned out really good to kind of change this way. And also that's one thing people should keep in mind is there are big brands that you can recognize, by their look. And they're usually big names and they don't have to adapt or change as often, even though they still do have to change. And I could give you some names, that you've probably seen for years that have had to change. But if you are versatile with what you do, you can get so much more work. I mean, you can get a lot more work if you can just be versatile and do what the main thing is do what the client wants. If the client wants you to design Lake and Lodge, you do that. If they want you to design something else, you do that. You do what they want. That's where you get the work. And if you don't do it, and if you balk at it, or you try to fight them on it, you'll find yourself without work.
So don't maybe takeaways. Don't be a prima donna on.
Right, exactly.
Just embrace it and say, hey, yeah, I can try it. I'll try it and let's see.
Yeah, for sure, I can do that. You don't ever say, well, let me think about it, or you sure you want that color, or no, I'm not changing that. That's a no-no. When they come at you and say, oh, would you change this color? There are a lot of artists that have gone through this where they go, I don't want to change that. That's not the color I meant. I don't want it that color. And you go, they'll end up not working with that company very long. They say, take that pink and make it green. You do it. You do what they want, because they know what sells for them. They know what their customers want. And that was one thing I learned when I, doing the fabric design for that company. It's like, they know what their customer wants, so do it like they want it to do. So, and then other things I have designed are like shower curtains. I've designed sheets, the bedding. I've done rug designs, and you can see these rugs here are with that Lake and Lodge look.
Yeah.
So company, but there's a big market for it. So it's just what the customer wants.
So Katya asked a question. So should you not want to have one distinctive style?
Not unless you're a big name, like somebody like, say, for instance, I'm thinking of Mira Engelbright, because
I was thinking of her too.
Because she got into the situation where, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but she was known for her certain look and the red cherries. And she told somebody, because I knew somebody that worked really, really close with her, she told us that I would wish I never had to paint another damn cherry again. And she actually tried to get it. She was also with my same fabric company. And she presented a whole new style with them. And they said, nope. So she went to a different company and they took it. And when I saw it, I went, I really like that, but I don't like it being Mary's because that's not Mira Engelbright. But I love the fabrics, but it just wasn't her. And I don't know. I think that was her only line she did for that. But if you've got a specific look you want to be known for, you can keep that look. And as it gradually change, don't come up against a wall and realize you've got to change, and you can't do it because you're known for one look, like the cherries. So
there's something to that, though, because you've had a long career, right? So it's about, yes, you have a distinctive look for different trends and different parts of the industry, but then you are also willing to try new things as you kind of overlap and pivot to do new things. So could you do a different line under a pseudonym, or that Amy says?
Yeah, I know an artist who does a lot of fine art, and she wants to license. And she said, licensing, the fine artists kind of frown on licensing. So she's been trying to go back and forth between the industry. So she's decided to put her licensing art under a different name. So, you can do that too. Let me see.
Because you can make a lot of money. There's a different industry. It's a different than selling fine art.
Right. So it's two art, but she's really having to do it under different names now. Like I know Tracy Porter is another name that's really branded. Everybody knows her look and everything. But back when I was doing with the fabric company that I was doing all that work for, they had two lines within the fabric company. They had the independent quilt shops that were like the little small, shops. And then they had the chain stores. So the shops, the quilters only lines do not like for their designers to be designing for the chains. So I designed for both. So they put, the independent shops were under my name. The ones that went into the chains, they put under that Lucky Duck design that I used for cross stitch. So that way it was like two different lines I had with them. So there are ways to work around it. You can always, if you want to be known like say Tracy Porter, you can stick with your look. But if you want to be doing other things on the side, you could do it like under that different name.
I love that. That's a good insight.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always business savvy?
It's just something I learned every step of the way. You make a mistake and you go, oops, now I know not to do that again or something like that. But you learn, it's a constant learning process.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the show that in addition to what I'm doing now with the licensing, I still have an Etsy shop. I have print on demand shops. And the Etsy shop is focused on quilting because I've got so many quilters and you can target them so easily. So I've got a lot of quilt followers and everything. And then people, like I say, it's a big industry. So I have the mugs in there. And then I have a lot of downloadable quilt patterns that they can do as PDFs and download. So I don't have to ship them. And these are two patterns that were in books that I did. And the thing about that is I own the copyrights to them. So I'm pulling, as I get time, pulling them out of the books and making individual patterns to put on my Etsy store. So that it's kind of just multi-use. You try to use things as many ways as you can.
Was that something you did? You always kept out? If you could, you held the copyright?
I tried back when I was doing a lot of that freelance work where I showed you all the books and magazines. So many of them back then wanted all rights and you gave them up because it was just the standard industry standard. And then I look back now and I realized I can't use any of those designs. And then as I started going forward, I started keeping all rights. And so now there's a company that keeps sending me emails all the time, wanting me to, submit designs to them. But that company is one of the ones that was very strong on all rights. And so I talked to somebody one time, they said, we can work around that now, but I just have never gone back to it. But mainly because of time, but but the books, all the books I did, they were my designs so that I could, reprint them like individually like this. So,
yeah.
And then I started Art Biz Jam.
So this was 2013.
2013, and this came about because as artists, like say Atlanta Gift Market, we're always meeting up and talking, but we have such limited time to talk, but we love to get together, network and talk. So I kept thinking maybe I could have some kind of art retreat. I have a condo in Destin, Florida, and I thought I can have an art retreat or something down there where we can all get together and we can talk and network and do everything. And then so I started, talking to some people about it, and one product developer from a big giftware company came in on helping us out with that. And she suggested, because there's so many art retreats where you learn a different technique, but it's art focused, like you just go and you learn a different technique or just paint or do whatever. And we decided to make it business focused for art businesses, because she told us that so many people were going into licensing that had no clue on what to do or what anything was involved with that. And she said they really need to be educated. So that was the focus of Art Biz Jam. Was she came and spoke that first year, and we did have a little bit of creative time, but she spoke about the industry she was in and how to submit designs and what artists need to do. So that first year was like at the beach, and it was a small group. It was our closing party. That evening at the beach, our last night, we had a shrimp boil, and so had a party. So here we were, that first Art Biz Jam. So all of these people became friends. It became a tribe, and they're so welcoming of new people coming in. And two of those girls there have been at every one, every year they've come back, and some of the others have been back at different ones, and ones that come for later ones keep coming back every year. So we thought when it first started that it would just be a rotation every year of different people. but it didn't turn out that way. The same ones kept coming back. We're just adding more to it. So this is the last live one in 2019. It was in Kansas City. And this is not everybody. Some of them had already left early, and some other product developers had left. So I think some were out wandering around, didn't realize we were going to do the group picture. But so it's grown to this. And then this, of course, last year, 2020, it went virtual, and that was a whole new process because I didn't know how to do a virtual retreat. I knew how to do Zoom, but I didn't know. So I took a 3-day, very intense online event where they talked about how to do virtual things and how to promote it and things to do. So that gave me a lot of insight, and I just sat down and had to switch from live to virtual, like I think last May or something, because I put out words, in the groups, like, do you want to do virtual, or do you want to come live? And everybody's going, no, we're not going to travel. So by doing it virtual, and I was like really scared it wasn't going to go over, and it turned out to be such a success. I mean, I couldn't believe what a big success it was. And so it even started, it was going to be like Zoom meetups every week until the end of December. And then it was going to be it. But everybody was loving the meetups, and they were coming. And so we started doing it twice a week and go on through the end of March. And by accident, well, not by accident, one person mentioned some software. So she did a tutorial in one of the meetups, and everybody loved that. And the next one, they wanted to know how to do something else. So another person told how to do that, because all of these people that come to these meetups, they got some kind of skill themselves from what they've been doing over the years. So now part of our meetup is a regular tutorial on something, and we'll be talking about something, and somebody goes, I know how to do that. So I said, okay, well, you're going to do that for such and such a week, So we have all these tutorials, and then I record these so that, the ones that can't make it to the live Zooms can go back and watch them, because they have so much information in them. And everybody, even the new people that came in with the virtual, have all meshed together and become friends. And it's just turned into such an amazing thing. I never would have known this in 2013, what this would grow into.
So Paul says, I love how Phyllis just sees the possibilities in every turn she takes. And I totally agree, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
It is infectious, Phyllis, for sure.
Out of the Art Biz Jam too also came the membership. So at the end of the one that I just showed in 2019, I came back and learned a whole new system as Kajabi for doing a membership. And talk about Kajabi. I know how to do websites. Kajabi was like, oh my God, that took 2 months to learn to do that. It was just so different. And I'm constantly online with help, like, well, what do I do? Because it was just so intense to try to learn to do that. But I think I've kind of mastered it enough to get me by right now.
That's awesome.
So that's going on. And then I wanted to show here in closing how things just go around. Like first one, the one on the left with my career, I started with cross stitch and needlework, went into quilting, went into fabric design, went into product licensing. So one of my cross stitch companies I did work for years ago as a kit company has reached out to me about 2 years ago to design some cross stitch kits for them. And then last year I did one, but because of the pandemic, that just kind of fizzled out. But they've come back to me this year with some more kits, 3 type of kits for them. So I'm still, some of that's just like come around again. The quilt designing, another quilt company, a fabric company has been asking me to design quilts for them with their fabric lines. So it just like rotates, and you have the parallel things going on too, like with Art Biz Jam, and some of the other things were running parallel. But, the conferences formed just from networking and knowing everybody liked to network. So we started the conferences, and then it grew, and then we started the membership, and then it turned into virtual last year with the meetups. And then this year is going to be virtual also, because nobody knows, what's going to happen with the pandemic. So we decided to, talking to the people, they just said, let's just do it virtual again. So even though a couple were like, I really want to do it live. But anyway, so next year when we can meet, it's going to be hybrid. It's going to be, which is a new term now for conferences, which is both virtual and in person. So there are a few people that joined the virtual that cannot travel. So they will wanting to do virtual too, continuing. So that's going to be another thing, learning how to do a hybrid conference.
Yeah. Regime said, I would love to design lost design patterns. I think that's a great idea too. So what's the biggest lesson that you learned or skill that, because you had to learn so many different things. Like you have this super cute, like yoga, cats doing yoga. And I don't even know how you stay up on all trends and what's going on, but I don't know when you sleep. But what was a big lesson for you in all these years of having to pivot and be flexible?
It's just mainly is if you want to stay relevant in the business, you've got to change, and you've got to embrace change and not dread it, and sometimes, especially with software and all these new apps and learning, like Clubhouse, learning, it's a new app, the newest hot thing, so, but no matter what you do, you just kind of try to embrace it and learn it and just try to keep up with what's going on. And if you hear something, ask questions about it. When somebody mentions something, you don't know what it is, what is that? That's, because the first time I heard Clubhouse, I went, what is that? And so you learn about it that way. You learn about anything. If you hear a trend, you ask about that. I remember when somebody in email one time said the fox is going to be the next owl. It's going to be, because the fox, the owl was so big in trends. And then somebody said the next owl is going to be the fox. It's going to be, and it was, fox went strong the trend. So you just kind of watch and pay attention. And if you are really wanting to keep up with trends and what's going on in companies, use the internet to search out these companies, but like go into stores physically. And I always like go in, and I've just got a habit. You see something, you just pick it up and see what it says on the back, like the company or who designed it. Because a lot of the artist name's usually owned as, the copyright. So you get, so you recognize certain artists and everything. You just pick it up and look at it, and you get the name of the company, or so you just have to research and just pay attention to everything. So.
Be curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Martin wrote down, you can do trendwatching.com. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. So you
companies on there that are, focused on different things. Some of them are really super expensive and some are not, but
So if Maura's thinking about taking some or making patterns, or my friend Alan, he knows all about like the blenders and he's creating this pattern series. What would be the first step for somebody like Alan or my friend Maura?
To actually start designing them, or
so they've designed them and now they want them to be used, like maybe sold. And what would be like licensing? Because this seems like a whole nother thing that I know nothing about. This is what Art Biz Jam is all about, right? So, yes. But what would be a first step?
Well, I would say the first step is to go out and go to fabric stores. But in some states, last year they were all closed, but if you got a local fabric store, even if it's a Joann's or I don't know if Michael's, I don't think they still have any fabrics, but like Joann's or Hobby Lobby, you can go in there and just kind of look, but they're going to use a lot of those will be private label on there. But the biggest way to actually know is to, if you can get the name of the fabric companies, because there's several big fabric companies, you could go to their websites and see what kind of lines they produce, because they show them on their websites. But if you want to actually talk to one and just get a feel for the market, I would say the Houston Quilt Market in October is like the main one. They have a spring one, but it's a smaller show. But the one in Houston is where everybody is, and you can talk to fabric companies and you can see what the lines look like, because some fabric companies kind of have a certain look or certain style, and others have different ones. You want to find one that kind of fits in with what your style is. So that's a good way just to walk down and just see what's that, because that market will blow anybody's mind that's not been there before, because it's just so huge and you've got so many fabrics and so many colors and it's just so vibrant and everything. So that would be, if you can go to Houston for that quilt market in October, that's the best way to get into the business.
Okay, so this is a longer question, but I really want to get it answered. So you've been able to tackle challenges. That's like the whole thing with Art Biz Jam or Kajabi or whatever. Like it never gets you so that you are like, oh, you know what? I'm just not going to do that. I've just known you for a year almost, and I've never seen like you've like, even with Clubhouse, you're like, yeah, I guess I'll just figure this one out too. Like, I don't know how you have this amazing attitude, but I love it. So when things come up, challenges come up in your business, while other people have come across these same hurdles, and it stops their progress, right? So they've allowed it to define, I'm not going to go there. And sometimes we have to choose what side of the fence we're going on. But how do you tackle it, and what has been like a key for you in continuing to be positive or move forward? Or is it a character trait?
I think it is, because there are times I say, why don't I just retire? But I love doing what I do, and I want to stay relevant. And I guess I'm kind of competitive too, and that I want to be out there. If I see somebody like, oh my God, they got these product lines, well, I can do that, So you think about it that way. And when you come up to a big challenge, like sometimes you want to throw, like learning Kajabi, I wanted to just like, I just can't do this, but I've got to do it. I've got to learn this. So you just sit there and make yourself plow through it. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting up and walking away for a few hours, or go shopping, or just, switch focus, like if you're working on one thing, quit that and work on something else. So it's just a combination of how big the problem is, and deadlines, and what you want to do. Because there are things, sometimes I look at it and go, I don't want to do that, so I'm not going to do it. Some opportunities I've had, like say that company keeps, sending me the emails about quilt design, and it's like, no, not going there again, So, you just decide. And I've learned too, I think it's best if you prioritize which you want, like which is your most important job to do, which you're going to benefit from the most, whether it's money or something else, and your biggest thing, and put that at the top. And I was in this event this last week, and I'm sure everybody's heard this, but they were talking about, what you put in the jar first is the stones, and then you put the pebbles, and then you fill it in with sand. You don't start with sand first. So I think of that with your business. You fill it with what the rocks are first. You get your biggest things and your biggest priorities and do that first. And then you come back to your secondary things. Now, what I want to do when I get to have the time to work on this, then you throw those pebbles in and work on that. And if you got time, you filter the sand in. And that could probably be a margarita or something like that. But,
Yeah, the final is some sort of liquid, right? So it seems like when you have something like the Kajabi, or even Procreate, or figuring out brushes, or even trends, it seems like you dive in and you like devote some time to that learning. So you'll pay for a course, you'll do some extra things that have to do with that. So is that a key of delegating some of that bigger rock time? Like, this is going to make a bigger impact, so I'm going to dedicate some time to that.
I've got to get this done, and it will help me if I knew this over here, or spend a little bit of time doing this research. So then I include that in with the rock time. Like, I've got to get this done, but I need to learn this first, or I need to, find some resources or something. So you just kind of lump it all together. So I hate it when I at this client, like, I need these new designs like 2 days. So you work it up, but you're in such a hurry, you can't really do like you really want. You just got to get to them. And then he says, well, let me give you 2 more days. Do some more. Those not add to these or change these. So you got 2 more days. And then I need 2 more days. It's got to be done absolutely by Friday. And so, you're scrambling like this. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, how about next Wednesday? Can you have them all to me then? And I'm like, if you tell me Wednesday, a week or two, later for the very beginning, I could have had all that time to really plan it out, So it's like, sometimes it's like you just got to hustle without having the time to really do what you want with it. So
maybe you have to make decisions quick too. Yeah. All right. So I want to ask this one too. Do you think of yourself as inspiring?
No, I think of myself as just like I say, what was that term I used? Like, you don't feel like I feel like I try to educate and try to be on top of things, but I never really know that I'm inspiring, because I don't look in at myself that way. I guess that's, what is it I said? You always feel like everybody else is doing more, better, or whatever. And here I'm the little me over here. And I still feel some of that sometimes, So
you wrote this answer, and I just think it's beautiful. You said, I think of myself as someone who loves to learn, create, and educate rather than being inspiring. But I think the way you learn and the way you create and the way you educate is super inspiring. So I'm just thankful that you're my friend and you answer my texts when I text you. So there's so many things. How do you stay energized in life? Do you have a key? Do you have a special drink you drink in the morning?
I just have a lot of energy. I don't know why I have a lot of energy, but I take vitamins and I don't know. I just have some energy and
You're just born that way.
Yeah, I think so. I've been called the Energizer Bunny more than once.
That's awesome. So I asked if there was a favorite quote. This is something I try to ask everybody. If there was a favorite quote or something that's really you keep close to your heart, especially as you go through trying times. Do you remember what you wrote?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can get the words right again. One of them is when things are looking kind of down. I think it's the darkest before the dawn, but then I found out it's really not darkest before the dawn. It's really more around midnight, but I still like the saying. Mm-hmm. The other one is if you shoot for the moon, you miss, you end up in the stars. So I like that one too.
I like that one too. I think that was Brian Littrell or I think, I don't know how you say his name, but something like that. Anyway, I think that's great. And Fabio says that energy is called passion. So I am just super thankful that you were able, and I want to share ways for people to get in touch. And I have shared a bunch when you were talking, but I just want people to make sure. And all these links are, if you go to rechargingyou.com/370, or you can find them underneath if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on your favorite podcast, these are in the show notes. So rechargingyou.com/370 or this. So phyllisdobbs.com, DOBBS, and then artbiz, BIZ, JAM.com. And then there's the membership also for the Art Biz Jam Abundance group. And then the Facebook group is or you can be friends with her, Phyllis Dobbs, and then also Facebook Art Biz Jam is a page. Go ahead.
Not just a page, but Art Biz Jam community. Anybody can join that, and there's a lot of artists that network, ask questions, answer questions. So, it's chit chat going on there all the time usually about art licensing and art, things like that. So it's a really good group.
You can check her out on LinkedIn, Phyllis Dobbs, and then also Instagram. She has two, so Art Biz Jam, and then also Phyllis M. Dobbs, M as in Mitchell, I think is your maiden name, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So then on Clubhouse, you can find her at Phyllis Dobbs. I don't know how you have time to do all this stuff, but okay.
First time I was on, it was 4 hours. I mean, I cooked dinner, ate dinner, and took a shower when it went off. I was listening in the shower, and they said bye, but of course I couldn't say anything.
Oh my goodness, that's commitment. For sure.
That been on since then.
So I can imagine. So if you are interested in print on demand, she does on Spoonflower. I think Pridge asked about that. So spoonflower.com/profiles/Phyllis Dobbs, and then Zazzle and Etsy. So she still designs quilts for the store on Etsy, which is called Whimsy Color. So Phyllis, thank you so much. Thank you for gracing us with your amazing story and just your energy and presence. And I can't wait to continue to learn more about licensing. I'm not quite there yet, but I know that Amy and Maura and Alan are all interested in that stuff. And I think maybe some other people who are here today.
Get in touch with me. I mean, I can tell them, get in touch with me.
Yeah, for sure. And the best way to do that is just go to phyllisdobbs.com. Is that the best way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get my email out. That's a long,
That's okay. But they can go there and find a way to get in touch with you at phyllisdobbs.com. Phyllis, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on. And and just so you guys know, it's still Love on Designers. This week, I think you're supposed to be encouraging someone. So think about somebody who's behind you, who maybe you don't feel as much of an imposter syndrome. You know that you know a little bit more than what they know. So reach out and encourage somebody, because you have no idea how much that really means to somebody else, for them to see that you like their piece or to comment it on something. So this one's reaching back, and the last week is going to be reaching forward and encouraging people who are our mentors, people like Miss Phyllis. And then next week we have Van Cooley, and she's going to talk to us about some of our in our internal battles that maybe we have, that imposter syndrome that Miss Phyllis talked about, I think it comes to play for sure. And we're going to talk about some of those stories that we're telling ourselves in our head. So I can't wait for you guys to meet Van, and we will see you guys next week.